Hello again and welcome back. I mentioned at the end of one of my previous videos that I was planning a large segmented vase project, and this video will be the preparations for that vase. I have some wood that I'm going to mill into strips and then cut into segments that will tie in with a plan that I have made for it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll show you the wood that I have to work with and the outline of the vase that I hope to have at the end of it, and explain a little bit about how I came to design the vase that I will make. So I designed this vase using a piece of software called SegmentPro, which is a software that you can purchase that will do all the calculations for your segments, angles and length and everything, and it gives you a printout. I won't go too much into that now, as once I have a better understanding of how the program works, I'll do a video where you can actually see me go through the process of designing a vase or a bowl or a vessel of some sort using the software. I'm still trying to get to grips with it. This is a practice really. I'm hoping that I'll be able to follow the printout summary of everything that's needed, and it should go together so that when it's ready to turn it will look as the picture shows. So this will be a 12-inch tall, and it's about 200mm wide vase with a chevron feature ring. And the species of wood that will make up this vase, I have a disc of teak that will be the solid base for the vase. The main body of the vase will be walnut, which I have two pieces of here, and there are feature rings at the bottom, in the middle and at the top that will be made of sapele, which I have here, and the chevron pattern will be made of cherry, sapele and idigbo to give a nice contrasting effect throughout the chevron pattern. And I have a large piece of cherry here to do that with. So the first thing I want to do is make up the lamination for what will be the feature ring. So I'll mill the cherry and the idigbo and the sapele into the dimensions that I have on my summary here. If you see, I have circled there the feature vase chevron, which is row 10. The segment length of the chevron will be 63.5mm, and the thickness of those segments will be 38mm. So when I mill up the various boards that will laminate together, it needs to total 38mm, which worked out as being 1 inch for the two pieces of cherry, 1/8 of an inch for sapele, and 1/4 of an inch for the idigbo. So let's go and do that first. Okay, the first one I'll do is the cherry, so I need 2 strips 1 inch thick that I'll cut off of this main board that I have here. Here are our 2 cherry boards. The overall length of the laminate I need is 700. This piece of cherry that I had is only 500 long. So I've cut 2 strips, and then when I rip this down the middle again, then I'll have more than enough laminate needed to make the chevron ring. cherry done. We'll move on now and we'll mill the Adigbo. For the Adigbo I need 1/4 inch thickness and 1 inch width to match the cherry that I just cut. So I'll resaw this piece of Adigbo first with the fence set at 1 inch, and then I'll cut the strips into 1/4 inch thickness. I have here a piece of Sapelli that is about 11 to 12 mil thick, just over 3/8 of an inch. I need to resaw it down into 1/8 slices, and that will make up the contrasting strips between the cherry and the Adigbo on the Chevron feature ring. Okay, so you can see here I have the first set of these laminate strips ready for glue up. Once I cut all the parts, I've sanded these ones down so that I can have a nice tight fit between them. The Sapelli strips are a bit off, as it was quite difficult to cut such a thin veneer with the blade that I have. It's a 4 TPI blade that I have, so it doesn't really cut very smoothly, it's still quite rough. But I've sanded them down and there is quite a good fit with the glue, and then it being clamped together. I think they'll come together fairly well. So we're ready to glue. All the strips I need laminated together that will make up the feature ring. This should be enough to allow me to cut 20 strips at a 25-degree angle that, when flipped around, will make 10 segments of the chevron pattern that I can cut angles on to make up the feature ring. So what we need to do now is cut these into strips at a 25-degree angle, with the segment length being 1.25 inches. To do that, I'll use this sled that I made for my bandsaw. It's just a very simple thing with an adjustable fence that I set using just a standard protractor to give me my angle, and I'll use just a waste bit of wood as a stop after I make the first initial cut. With these segments cut, by flipping one of them you can see the chevron pattern start to take shape. These segments will now be glued together in twos to form the chevron shape, and then the excess along the top and bottom will be cut off, giving us the finished segments ready for cutting the angle to make up the ring. But before I glue these, I'm going to take them over to my homemade disc sander on the lathe just to clean up these edges and remove the rough edges to make the glue up a bit easier. I made this sanding disc just out of a piece of plywood that I rounded off on the lathe and screwed a faceplate to the back of it so that it just screws onto the spindle of my lathe, and made a base here that is square to the sanding disc and just sits on the lathe bars. It's a very simple and crude design, but it's effective and does what I need it to, and it saves spending a few £100 on an actual 12-inch sander. So let's get these segments sanded and ready to glue. I have all my individual segments glued up now into 10 chevron patterns. The next step is to remove the waste material so that we're left with a rectangular segment that will go together to make the ring. And the way I've marked it out is to draw a line across the blank at the point of the feature, and then finding the centre of that line and then marking 20mm either side, as my design specification says that this segment should be 40mm thick. So I'll take this one to the bandsaw, set the fence up to cut off this part here, and then use that setting on the fence as a template to cut all of them to the same size, and then repeat again to knock off these corners as well. The last step now is to take each segment and to cut these corners off at the angle that will make up a perfect circle. In this case, with 10 segments, that's going to be 18 degrees. So I've set the fence of this slide to 18 degrees and set up a stop block to make sure that I'm going to cut right into the black corner so that I'm not going to lose any length in the chevron, so that the chevron goes together hopefully perfectly if all of this has been done correctly and to the right dimensions. Okay, so you can see here the ring with the segments put together. There is a slight gap on a few of the segments, but if I push in from the side here, it closes up all the other ones fairly well. So I've numbered the segments around. All of this side is number 1, all of this side is number 2. So I'll glue up the two halves separately, put the Jubilee clips around it, and then I'll put a clamp over the two that will open this joint, and at the same time it won't close down all of these other joints on the two halves, so that they'll be tight to glue. Then once that's cured, I'll take this and sand these two edges flat so that they'll go together perfectly, and then clamp it up to let it fully cure. That little discrepancy won't matter at all when it comes to actually finish turning the finished vase. So we'll get this glued up and then we can move on to the other rings in the vase. While the Chevron feature ring is gluing up, I'm going to make a start on the other rings for the vase. And first I'm going to do the two sapelli feature rings at the base and at the top of the vase as well, as they're both 20mm thick and 18mm wide. And I have some sapelli left over from a previous project which is already 20mm thick, so it's a case of ripping this down to the 18mm width for the segment. That's enough for the first ring, so I'll cut the segments for the next ring and then we'll glue them up. For these 6 layers of walnut I need strips cut at 20mm thick and 15mm wide, and so I milled up one of those walnut planks I had into strips that are 20mm thick, and I'll rip them now to 15mm wide before cutting them into the segments. This is a really nice piece of walnut. It's got some beautiful grain on it. Now we get to cut some more segments. Okay, I have now 6 walnut rings glued up along with the first sapelli ring and the feature ring, which is a total of 160 segments so far. So that's halfway through this vase now. I'll glue up the rest of the rings off camera just to save a bit of time and space on the memory card and to avoid the repetition in this video. Once all the rings are glued up, I'll show you the process of stacking them and gluing them together, ready to mount it on the lathe. The stage I'm at now is I have all of the segments glued together in their rings. The last one is just about ready to come out of the Jubilee clip. This is one of the sapelli contrasting rings that goes either side of the feature ring. That's the other one there, and my Chevron feature ring is here as well. And I've actually already glued the bottom half of the vase together, and I'm ready now to glue up what will be the upper half. I'm going to do it in sections as it's going to be quite a tall vase when it's finished. So I'll glue this onto the base block and I'll turn that first. I'll glue either side, the sapelli rings onto either side of the feature ring, and then glue that onto the top of there, turn a bit more on the inside, and then finally I'll glue this top half. I haven't glued this together yet, and that's what I'm going to show you now. But it's just to let you see the stages that it will be turned in. The lower half, the middle, and then the top, so that I'm able to get a nice finish on the inside without having to worry about stretching too far into the small opening in the top of the vase here. That will be the last part that goes on, and then I'll turn the whole of the outside at once. But I'll show you now the method I have for gluing the rings together. So this rig, I saw a video that Frank Howarth did where he made something similar to this. It's just a flat board with a very long threaded bar that comes up through the centre of it, with a nut and a washer there. And then I have several of these boards in various diameters, and the idea behind it is you take a ring, you put glue on it, and you put that over the top. Then you glue your next ring, and your next ring, and your next ring. So then when these are all glued up and you've aligned everything, you can take an appropriate sized disc that has a slot cut into it to go over the threaded bar, and then you can tighten down that bolt onto there, and that forces even pressure all the way around all of the rings and pushes them down. And it's pretty ingenious, as it is pretty good at preventing the rings from sliding about. So you glue a ring on, you get it in place all the way up, then put this on and tighten that bolt down, and it just pushes it straight down. It doesn't skid about everywhere and go out of line, and you can get quite a lot of force on it with that. So if you're interested in doing segmented things, I'll put a link to the video that Frank did where he made this, that I copied to have my own one, so that you can have a look at it to see how you can build one for yourself. But let's get this final part all glued up. that to dry now, and in the next video we'll assemble all of these parts and get it turned into the final lathe. So I'll leave this video here for now and you can tune in for that one. So thank you for watching, hope you've enjoyed it and you're excited to see the end product. Please subscribe to me if you haven't done so already, and thank you to all my subscribers for supporting me and watching my videos. I hope I can continue to make content that you will find interesting and enjoyable to watch. Thanks very much.